So we have one block off plate in there now. There you see the block off plate. Riva here. We have the intercooler, so we're going to go ahead and take that off. So we'll go ahead and remove the change this orientation here. So we will go ahead and remove the outer band. After we remove the outer band, we're going to remove the two hoses. So I'm not a fan of using the 215. Harness or plate fastener, but I mean it works. It's tight. You know, you just want to make sure it's the teeth are in at the bottom, which they are on both. So there you have it. Riva block off plates put in on the intake. In the distance there you can see my one external intercooler. That's a 300 factory OEM 300 intercooler. On the other side I popped the anchor plate out, the rivet gave out. So we are continuing the build. We're at a slight delay to gather up additional foam. I wanted to raise the intercooler even more to be sure that I cleared the mounting clips, which are these aluminum hooks there on each side, because you just wanting it to create some kind of bond. I'm not looking for some insanely tight bond, just something to hold it, cause some friction, keep it from sliding. When it's clamped down, when the intercooler is clamped down, that's going to be enough to hold everything in place, and then this will just be a little icing on the cake. I put it in the center because that's how the existing pad footprint's gonna be. So obviously this one's larger, and the whole plan was just to raise it up. So this is about a ½ inch. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this and see if we can follow me down into here. I had to move an exhaust hose out of the way. As you can see, I lost a little bit of my silicone, so I'll dump it in there. And then what I'm doing is just looking at how far back it needs to be. So here's the finished product. You can see the aluminum showing at the bottom there. Scoop this over. You can see a piece of the clip if I get high enough, but I have this centered on there. So I have one in there decently held down. What I had to do was wrap the rubber bungee around the clamp several times to make it a little tighter so that it fit around the intercooler tightly. But on the other side of the engine, I actually pulled the anchor straight out of the bolt, straight out of the hole. So I'm gonna have to figure out something else with that side to hold this down. But on this side, it's being held down pretty well. You know, some people make qualms about dealerships and their prices, and or even shops and their prices, and you can see why. A simple install there that took getting another pad and creativeness with the bungee tie down took about 30 minutes, but now the other side's going to take probably 3 hours to drill, rivet. So let's take a look at our progress here. I am going to put a end piece on that opening. That is the check sprayer, so I don't need that. And then here we have our tangle web. So here I have a joiner pipe. I was able to use the original hoses for the for the intercooler to get me to a certain point where I could complete the connection. So here on this supercharger intake, or it would probably be the exhaust, but I turned the short hose that typically went from here to the intake manifold. I turned it around, so instead of 90ing into here, it 90s that way into the original supercharger hose with a coupler in the center for stability. On this side, and once again, original hose. And this hose here, I'm gonna have to twist it a little bit. It's out of spec, just a tad bit by looking at it. This was a hose that I received from Riva from my order. When I ordered my hoses, I ordered them based on the part number for the boat, but for some reason these hoses aren't long enough. So I should say something because these hoses weren't cheap, but these definitely aren't OEM hoses for the Challenger boats that had the external intercoolers, which would be the 510, 520 horsepower option. The cooling lines, one of them hooks in, as you've seen earlier, just down there, and what I did was loop it and have it going into the top inlet or top connection, and then on the bottom connection there I have that running to the lower part of the exhaust manifold. What you're going to want to do, and I'll show you here in a few, is on the exhaust manifold, this hose here is prefabricated with a 90, and you can turn it forwards or backwards. So originally it was turned backwards to go into the internal intercooler. You're going to want to take that clamp off and turn it around to go forward so that you can go to your external intercooler. Here you can see a better shot of what I did. So the hose coming in from your raw water, I have circled around going into the top of the intercooler. The bottom hose I'm going to run obviously underneath the engine and exhaust system and couple it to here. So these are 3/4 inch hoses. And then just like on this side, I'll put a nipple on the check spray, and I'll turn this intake, supercharger intake up, and take this filter and put it at the end there. So you can see here, one's already missing. So I took the regulator, the rectifiers on top of it. So I'll mount it back here and have the regulator here, the rectifier here. But you don't need that long plastic pipe anymore. So I'm going to modify it I'll get better shots once I have the second piece removed. I just wanted to give you an update on what I've done so far. Not terribly bad. The only issue is just waiting on the silicone hoses to arrive. So what I've done here, so this is one of the Riva hoses that I ordered, and you can see that if it was, it's the same as the jet ski as far as how the hose has to be manipulated to get to the intercooler, but the length is just not there. So I have an extension hose to finish off the job there, and then for this one here, what I'm gonna have is a silicone reducer, 45, and that'll line me up 45-degree bend to go right into the intake. And then we can go ahead and test it, and hopefully everything will be good. But it's also easy to see why some of the 300s have so many problems when you have additional boost and just all of these hoses. You really do have to continually check your connections and just make sure that they are tight, because there's just a lot of moving parts here. So I'm excited about changing where the air intake is, because when the air intake was sitting in this area here, a lot of water was leaking onto it. So back here it's going to be a little drier, and we'll try to position it to also get some cooler air. So here is some progress. Let's twist it around right, oriented correctly. So I have the external going into the intake going into the supercharger. Here I have, you can see a Mishimoto reducer on the supercharger. I didn't need it on this one because when I purchased this, the supercharger is intercooler. When I purchased this one, it had the factory hoses, and the factory hoses for this intercooler already have the reducer on it from 3" to 2.5. So on this side, after I did the test fitting, I seen that it would be a lot easier just to go from a reducer, so that's a 3" to 2.5" reducer, to a coupler that goes directly into the intake. So that's very straight. I wish everything was that straight. The straighter it is, the smoother it is, the less breaks there are. If I could have got this in one pipe, like a 45 with a 2-foot lead on it, that would have been awesome too, but that's more custom. Here I have some leftover silicone. So what I'm going to do is fit this. Just by looking at it, you're probably like, oh, it's a little off, but once I put this down and turn it about right there, we line up pretty good. The reducer is a little bit crooked, so once I straighten that out and get it tightened down, then we'll go ahead and finish it up. So let's get started.